Hello and welcome to the 2019 Round 2 CalHome Program Disaster Assistance NOFA and Application Workshop.
We're going to skip over a couple of the slides that we had in our original programming that just kind of introduced the players and also the facility notifications of turning off your cell phone and whatnot. But I do want to go over and do some introductions of the CalHome program staff. My name is Nicolay McKay and I'm the NOFA section chief. I will be handling the first part of the presentation. At that time, I will hand it over to Cheryl Jeffries, who's the lead program representative for the CalHome program this round, and Amy Clausen will take up the rear, and we'll finish off the presentation going over some critical information that you will need as you manage your award. So for today's agenda, these are the things that we want to make sure that you're aware of, what's new and the reminders in our NOFA. We're going to go over the program overview. We're going to talk about the summary, the allocations, and the timeline for getting the awards out, and also the timeline that you have in order to utilize the funds and complete your activities. We're going to go over the program requirements. We're going to talk about the eligible applicants and what that involves, and we're going to talk about the eligible activities. During the regular NOFA sessions, we had a break. We will not be taking a break. And then we will move on and Cheryl will take over the presentation and she will go over the threshold and application evaluation. And she's also going to talk about the scoring and what that entails. Then after Cheryl has completed her comments and her portion of the presentation, we will then move into the standard agreement and grant management section. We felt it was very important to add this because this will be the only training for this grant. And although it is not extensive, we do want to highlight some key components of your standard agreement and the requirements that you will be held to if you get an award. Then at our regular presentations, we opened up the session for questions and technical assistance. For the purposes of this webinar, you can submit your questions to the CalHome NOFA inbox. So if you have a question as you listen to this presentation, go on ahead and submit a question and we will respond within 24 hours. So this is round 2 of a 2-round disaster NOFA. The first round was limited to just a couple counties in this state of California. Lake County, I believe, was one of them. The round 2 is going to expand that service area to several other counties. There are also application requirements. In this round, you will have to attain a minimum score of 550 points in order to secure an award for disaster funding. There are additional disaster resiliency requirements, which is basically a certification that your local jurisdictions will have to certify that they are complying with any disaster resiliency components in their building standards. We've expanded the menu of activities to include more than just owner-occupied rehab. And all applicants receive full points in the community need and feasibility categories. Also, what's new in round 2 is the over-the-counter application process. There is an application submittal deadline. However, the application period is open and it is first come, first serve based on the date we receive your application. Additionally, the application workbook now includes a self-score component, which will help you determine whether or not you have sufficient experience in order to qualify to apply for these funding sources, and Cheryl will go over that self-score in depth later on in our presentation. In the round 1, we had an appeal process, and that will continue into round 2. You will receive a notice from HCD that your application was either incomplete, failed threshold, or you received a reduction in your preliminary point score. In order to submit an appeal, you must submit it in writing. You cannot provide any new evidence, and HCD will provide a decision back to you in writing within 15 business days, and all decisions are final. However, I would like to point out that this is an over-the-counter application, and so the appeal process is not extremely important. If you submitted an application and we did not pass you for threshold or reduced your point score and you have additional information that you could add to your application that would change our decision, you could just turn around and resubmit an application rather than go through this appeal process, which is lengthy. The appeal process works much better in a competitive round than it does in the over-the-counter. However, if you feel that the information was in your original application and we just missed it, that would be the time to use this appeal process and point us to that evidence in your application that we missed. We must receive your appeal within 5 business days from the date of the HCD point score determination letters or threshold review letters. Those will be sent out by email. The date will be on the letter, and that is the date that starts the time clock ticking. You need to submit your appeal to the CalHome NOFA at hcd.ca.gov inbox by 5 p.m. That will be the timestamp on your email, or you may mail them to 2020 West El Camino in Sacramento. Regardless of the way that you elect to submit your appeal, please keep in mind that the appeal must be received within that 5 business day period. And if your submission comes late, you will be notified that we will not evaluate it. So I want to move right into the program overview. This round of funding comes from several different sources of CalHome dollars. We have $11 million in Prop 46 funds that have been disencumbered over the past several years, plus an additional $52 million of Prop 1C funding that has also been disencumbered. These were previous bond offerings that funded the CalHome program. And additionally, we have $37 million of the new Prop 1 funding, which adds up to $100 million in funding that's available for counties, localities, and nonprofits to utilize in areas that were impacted by wildfires, flooding, and mud and debris flows. This map demonstrates the areas in which can apply for this funding. In order to be eligible as an applicant, you must be able to provide services in any of the areas that are designated in the FEMA California disaster declarations listed on this slide. There are 4 of them. This map also demonstrates the counties that are eligible, which include Shasta, Mendocino, Lake, Sonoma, Butte, Nevada, and Napa. And then in Southern California, that includes Santa Barbara, Ventura, Los Angeles, Orange, and San Diego. Funding amounts are allocated by county based on the total amount of destruction that was experienced in these disaster events. So the more homes that were destroyed, the higher the amount that you will find in your county's approximate CalHome allocation that is listed on the right side of this slide. You'll notice that Butte County is eligible for the most of the money, where Nevada County and Orange County, who experienced very little damage from these disasters, is held at $1 million. One of the things that I would like to really impress upon the applicants for the CalHome funding is that in some of these areas, $20 million or $34 million, even $7 million or $5 million may be very, very difficult for a single applicant to expend within the contract period. So we're encouraging people in these counties, potential applicants in these counties, to collaborate with each other, identify who would be the best source to deliver the different types of activities that are available in this NOFA, and then strategically apply for the funding in order to ensure that the funds can be utilized and spent with the amount of time you have to expend the funds. I also want to remind everybody that there will be no extensions to the expenditure deadline in your contracts. You will have 36 months from your award date in order to expend your funds, and if you apply for the full amount that's available in any of the counties that you serve, you may or may not be able to utilize all those funds and get them expended within that 36 months. So we really encourage you to collaborate, work with your partners, and find a way to utilize these dollars in the counties as designated in the best way possible. Sorry about that. There's a minimum and maximum loan amount that you can make to the borrower in the activities that are borrower assistance loans. The minimum loan to a borrower can be no less than $1,000. And the maximum loan to a borrower can be no more than $100,000. The total assistance for an impacted county cannot exceed the county set aside, or it cannot exceed the amount of your award. The 2019 CalHome timeline looks like this. Our application deadline is September 3rd by 5 p.m. or until funds are exhausted by the counties. Awards will be made within 90 days of receipt of an application, and standard agreements are anticipated to be in your hands within 90 days of your award date. So now let's go over the CalHome program requirements. I'm going to talk about eligible applicants in the impacted counties. You can be a local public agency or a nonprofit corporation to apply for these funds. To be eligible, you must have operated a housing program as a housing program administrator, that you are authorized to engage in or assist in the operation of housing programs for households with low or very low income, or you are authorized to engage in or assist in the development of housing for households with low or very low income. The applicant that's applying for these funds must have the ability to perform the requirements of the activity, and they must demonstrate that they have the experience to do so. Local public agencies, your activities are restricted to your jurisdiction. So if you're a city within a county and you apply for CalHome funds, you're restricted to your city limits. Counties are restricted to their unincorporated areas. Nonprofits are a little bit different. Their activities are restricted to those counties in which they have operated a housing program within the last 4 years, or for which they have an existing 523 Technical Assistance Service Agreement with USDA. Eligible applicants must be able to show they have experience as a housing program administrator for a minimum of 2 years prior to the date of the application. We will evaluate your experience for the last 4 years. We ask you that you submit your experience for 5. For each activity which is applied for, you may count existing program experience in other programs. So if you have home or CDBG housing experience in the last 4 years, you may count that as experience towards your CalHome experience. And you may count any administrative activities that you've performed, and you may count the administrative activity of the program performed by a third party. Our eligible activities, we have several, so I'm going to start with first-time homebuyer mortgage assistance. This is gap financing for income-eligible households who were formerly renters and displaced by disaster events. They could have been displaced two separate ways. These former renters could have lost their housing due to the disaster, and that means that it was destroyed. Or these renters could have been displaced because their current housing at the time of the disaster became so unaffordable they had to move, or they are rent burdened because of increases in rent. So if a renter has experienced an increase of their rent above 5% of what it was prior to the disaster, and it exceeds the 30% acceptable housing expense, they would be eligible to be a first-time home buyer and meet the disaster requirement for assistance. First-time home buyer mortgage assistance can also be utilized for former owners. The way this works is if a former owner owned their lot and their home was destroyed and they choose not to rebuild because it's not in compliance with the building codes, or they can't get it in compliance with the building codes, they can then purchase a home from the open market within the jurisdiction. Up to 25% of the program funds that are awarded to an applicant may be used to benefit households not meeting the disaster criteria. That means that their home did not have to be destroyed, and that means that they can be a renter that was not displaced by disaster events but are otherwise eligible to apply. Income eligibility is at or below 80% of the area median income for the state of California's income limits. Please do not confuse them with the HUD income limits that are also found on our website. They are slightly different. One is a little bit higher than the other in some counties, and you need to make sure that you're utilizing the right income chart. The next activity that's eligible for assistance is the owner-occupied rehab program. This is also This is also gap financing for income-eligible households who were owner-occupants of damaged or destroyed homes or structures. The rehab costs can repair or fully construct their home. It will also replace manufactured housing. Replacement costs for manufactured housing located in a mobile home park or elsewhere. There are some distinctions that I would like to make as we go over this slide. Owner occupants who have damaged, destroyed structures on a lot that they own may choose, if they so desire, to replace a stick-built home with a manufactured housing unit on a permanent foundation. If you're going to do manufactured housing replacement of properties located in a mobile home park and they are not on a permanent foundation, there is a different loan structure for those types of projects, and you are limited to 10% of your allocation to assist those types of properties. Technical assistance for self-help housing is a very underutilized program. Basically, what technical assistance for self-help housing is, it provides direct services to an organization who is going to operate a self-help housing development. It covers the nonprofit's administrative costs. It covers the costs for assistance, training, and supervision on the self-help activities. You may use these funds to reimburse the homebuyer education costs in the form of a grant, in addition to whatever gap financing you provide to the household who purchased the housing. and it can help with costs of it will help with costs in the project development. You cannot access the technical assistance for self-help housing unless you get a pre-development loan to do self-help housing, with the disaster assistance dollars also included as one of the eligible activities in this NOFA. How come it's black? Technical assistance for shared housing matches services to homeowners and to renters. This technical assistance for shared housing covers the indirect cost to administer a shared housing program. It covers costs for information and referrals, outreach, marketing, and program evaluation. It also costs the salary. It also covers the cost of direct services, which is basically the salary for someone that does shared house matching, documents the matching efforts, and does follow-up. Shared housing is not a rental assistance program. It is only a program that matches available units to seekers of affordable housing. The homeownership project development loans is for gap financing. It will roll into assistance for individual buyers of the project development units. You can use your project development dollars to purchase the real property, pre-development costs, on-site improvements, carrying costs, insurance, and your environmental reports. You cannot use your pre-development dollars for unit construction. Unit construction is not an eligible expense, and construction cannot begin before execution of your standard agreement. If you choose to do your project as a self-help project, you may also apply for the technical assistance grant to help you cover the cost of overseeing your self-help labor. For owner-occupied rehab, you need to have the capacity to operate a local owner-occupied rehab program. This includes being able to review your appraisals for property eligibility, and after rehab value limits must be less than the local median sales price. You must be able to meet the loan closing requirements, which includes having title insurance, and the homeowners must be able to maintain their property taxes and insurance. Typically, they will have a first mortgage, and so you need to ensure that if the first mortgage does not require impounds, that you have some way to ensure that property taxes and fire insurance is maintained on the properties that you have a lien against. You must have experience completing the rehab construction requirements and making inspections to ensure that the structures are completed and meet the property standards for the CalHome program. Your owner-occupied rehab underwriting guidelines must be submitted and approved by HCD. We typically call these your owner-occupied program guidelines. All borrowers must be an eligible owner or an eligible renter at the time of disaster and must obtain and maintain property insurance requirements. Program assistance for self-help technical housing. The recipient includes developing program guidelines. All of your development dollars must roll into first-time homebuyer mortgage assistance or gap financing for your eligible buyers. You must submit your program guidelines for your first-time homebuyer program to HCD for approval. You must ensure that the home that you built and sold does not exceed the price of an appraised value. You're restricted to the sales price. Your sales price is restricted to the appraised value. Prior to disbursement of an advance, because you can request an advance of your pre-development loan funds not to exceed 25%. The recipient must submit a certification that they have no other funds available to cover the costs that the advance is going to cover. Program administration for shared housing and technical assistance. Capacity to operate a shared housing program includes being able to provide information on available services and the program requirements. You must have a network to do outreach and marketing activities for the homeowners and the potential seekers, which will become the renters of the units. Obtain program evaluation from clients. Effectively match homeowners with renters so that there is a successful partnership and that it ensures that there is stable housing for the seeker. Documentation of housing costs, that the housing cost of the seeker is reduced and is an affordable range. And match follow-up services. Seekers cannot be matched to a homeowner who rents more than one room or granny unit in their occupied unit. And you must follow the CalHome reimbursement guidelines to reimburse yourself for the costs of operating this technical assistance program. CalHome has some ineligible use of funds. You cannot utilize your CalHome funds to refinance existing loans. You cannot use the CalHome funds to cover the costs to rehabilitate or repair a property owned by a mobile home park owner. You may rehabilitate units in the park, but you may not repair property that's owned by the mobile home park owner. You cannot use CalHomes for off-site improvements. You can't use CalHome dollars to construct units of housing. You cannot use it to cover the reoccurring loan closing costs. That's taxes and insurance. You cannot use CalHome to pay off debts or lien or judgments in order to make an applicant eligible. And you cannot use CalHome funds for your self-help technical assistance. Oh, wait a minute. You cannot use your CalHome funds for construction costs associated with your technical assistance. Your mortgage assistance loans are for individual households that's income certified at or below the 80% area median income for your county. Again, remember to use the state of California's income limits. Your mortgage assistance is all deferred payment loans. They may bear a term of up to 30 years. We recommend a 30-year term that matches the term of their first mortgage. They can have a simple interest associated with the loan of up to 3%. Individual applicants can decide what type of interest they may want to charge for their CalHome program loans. And you can only assist a primary residence either with rehab or mortgage assistance. And you must comply with the homebuyer homeowner loan to value limits. Your homebuyer homeowner loan to value limits is the area median sales price. You do not need to use, and I do not recommend that you use the HUD's median sales price limits that are published for the HUD programs. You can actually use a more effective limit by doing a market analysis, a current market analysis, and determine what your median area sales price limit is. And if this particular limit is volatile, you may update it. You just have to have the documentation to show that you performed the analysis and can document what the median sales price was at the time that your escrow closed for whoever you are assisting at the time. For manufactured housing, the assistance is a little bit different. If you do manufactured housing on a lot that is owned by the home buyer or the home owner, then it is a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, just like first-time home buyer assistance. However, If you provide financial assistance to rehabilitate or repair or replace a manufactured housing that is located in a mobile home park and not affixed to a permanent foundation, you can provide the recipient with a 20-year secured forgivable loan. You may only use 10% of your award to provide this type of assistance, and so you'll need to watch very carefully that you do not exceed that 10% limit. You must verify that the recipient is the registered owner of the unit and that their registration fees are current and correct. Activity delivery fees can be reimbursed to the grantee in addition to the amount of assistance that they make to an individual owner-occupied rehab project or a first-time homebuyer mortgage assistance loan. So for mortgage assistance component, up to 10% of your costs for mortgage assistance can be considered activity delivery. Up to 20% of the loan amount for an owner-occupied rehab project can be considered activity delivery. You request reimbursement of these fees in addition to requesting reimbursement for the assistance dollars that you provided the homeowner. You must be able to provide cost receipts for all activity delivery fee claims. Your home buyer education, which is required to assist a first-time home buyer mortgage assistant applicant, is also part of your activity delivery fees and is reimbursed in the grant for activity delivery and is included in the activity delivery fee maximum cap of 10%. Owner-occupied rehab loans do not require the first-time home buyer education. This concludes my portion of the presentation. Again, if you have additional questions or need clarification of anything that I have gone over in this portion of the presentation, please submit an email to the CalHome at hcd.ca.gov inbox, and we will respond back to you with a question. Also would encourage you to review the frequently asked questions that we'll be posting on our website of questions that were asked in our previous live web presentations, and those will also be available to you for view. So check those out and make sure that if there's something that you don't understand there, that you reach out to us and request clarification. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn the time over to Cheryl, who's going to pick up the presentation and continue.
Okay, I will be covering the thresholds and application evaluation portion of today's presentation. We'll begin with threshold. All applications must be received by the deadline and demonstrate compliance with CalHome statutes and regulations. We have specific criteria that must be met in order to qualify. The threshold criteria is as follows. The applicant meets geographic restrictions. Applicant is eligible jurisdiction or nonprofit. The activity is eligible. The proposed use of funds is eligible. The application is received by the deadline. The application is complete. The application has not been altered or modified. Application is signed by the party authorized in the resolution. The applicant has no unresolved audit findings or pending lawsuits. And the applicant meets eligibility requirements for the activity in which they applied for. Now let's cover the application, completing it, organizing it, and submitting it. So when you begin your application, it's a good idea to have your regulations handy for reference. We need a complete, clear, accurate application signed by the authorized representative. Please use the new self-score application in Excel format And remember that no information, written or oral, will be accepted after the deadline. So last year and in previous years, HCD provided a training manual for the mortgage assistance and owner-occupied rehab components of the program. We do not have that training manual anymore. It did provide a step-by-step guide in completing the PDF version, and now we've transitioned to the self-score Excel version. So what we do have is a guidance, application guidance and instruction manual. It will just give you a little bit more detail on completing the new self-score application and provide some better idea of the documentation we're looking for and what we expect in an application. Again, it's not a training manual, just guidance and instructions for those two components, mortgage assistance and OOR. So the self-store application components, the overview tab is the application summary. We're calling it overview now. It is the application summary, and unlike previous years where you had to fill out that application summary per every application that you filled out, whatever activity it was, you only do it one time. There's just the one application summary, and that's it, just the one, and then whatever activity you're applying for. We also have mortgage assistance Article 4, owner-occupied rehab Article 5, TA Self-Help Article 6, TA Shared Housing Article 7, and Project Development Loan Article 8. The application certification and commitment documentation is at the back of the self-score application at the last tab. So the overview or application summary is where you're going to give us your application information and FEMA declaration number, which is over there in the far right. It's a drop-down box, and you'll choose the declaration that corresponds with your jurisdiction. The authorized rep and contact information, you will give us that information in the yellow shaded areas. Those are the only areas, by the way, that are fillable, those yellow shaded areas. Please make sure that that information is current and correct. For the arrow that says self-certification there on the right, this is where you will self-certify that you have no audit findings, pending lawsuits, and that you will comply with the program requirements. The attachment title now is the file name. In past years, we had attachments as number 1, 2, 3, or 4 with the exhibits. We're not doing that anymore. What we want on that tab is exactly what you're submitting. So this particular attachment would be the app eligibility 7750 would be what the tab reads for the attachment. So also in the past we had the resolution and payee data record in the government TIN form as attachments in the back of the application. Now you'll just click on the links, pull up the forms, and print them as needed and submit them with your application. And to the far right there, the experience drop-down box, what we're looking for is that operating a program experience for a minimum of 2 years prior to the application date. And once you hit that drop-down box, it'll give you options of which level experience best fits your program. For nonprofits, along with the standard 204, the resolution, and the TIN form, you also need to submit these other documents here in the shaded area, the peach color shaded area, and you will again title them exactly as they are, financial statements or articles of incorporation, whatever it is what you will, the file name for that attachment will be. You also need to use the drop-down box up there to choose your level of experience and provide supporting documentation. So on this part of the application summary, that arrow to the far right that has the number 1, you're going to want to go there first, use the drop-down box, and choose your assisted county Once you choose the county, the jurisdiction you represent, then the approximate allocation will populate right below that. Once you've done that, you're going to go right back up there to program or project activity and choose the activity that you're applying for. You will not be able to view the application for the activity until you choose from that drop-down box, and you can't choose from the drop-down box until you've chosen your county. So hit that county first and then go back in for your activities, and once you do that, the application tab will be at the bottom of the workbook for you to access. None of the other fields there will be accessible to you. They will populate as you complete the application. The total use of funds or selection criteria, you cannot access those areas, but they will, like I said, auto-populate as you complete the application. So the components of the application are pretty much the same for the programs. We're looking for program operation experience, loan underwriting experience, loan servicing experience, program targeting, financing and affordability, and for the mortgage assistant component, the contributed labor program and home buyer education program. I'm going to use the mortgage assistance application as an example. So when you are filling out a program activity application, the first thing you want to do is that very first shaded cell up there, the number of assisted units, because that's going to generate the maximum per unit eligible and so on. Once you put in your assisted units, you're going to go right below that, put in the requested amount and the requested activity delivery fee, which can be up to 10%. It does not have to be the full 10, but it cannot exceed that 10%. If it exceeds it, the cell will be red and you won't be able to move forward until you can correct that. Where the 1, 2, and 3 numbers are, this is the community revitalization point getter. So we're asking one of 3 things. Either your units are located in a qualified census tract, or in a formally designated redevelopment area, or it meets a legislatively mandated priority for funds allocated to the CalHome program. For that number 3, the place you can find that information for what is considered mandated priority for funds is right there at that bottom of the screen, info@calhousing.org. That's the 2019 list of priorities there. Where the file name community revitalization is, that's where we'll get the supporting documentation for whichever one of those 3 you choose. For loan servicing, we want a narrative of the loans that will be served. We want some budget information and a choice of 1, 2, or 3 down there. This is where you will give us your documentation for that and entitle it MA Loan Servicing. So this is asking for your experience of funding sources and so on. That those 3 arrows there from the top are kind of trying to explain how you're going to calculate points. And this is kind of important because it's one of the few places where we are counting points, and the points they'll be important to whether or not you get funded. So there's a begin date, an end date, a units assisted, and there's also that first little arrow where it says admin years assisted county. There's a drop-down box right there, and that's where you're going to choose the jurisdiction that you represent. For nonprofits, the cell will be red if the experience will not count in that county. So you're going to put in a beginning and end date. We're looking for experience for the past 4 years and the units assisted within that time frame. If you put in a begin and end date that goes beyond that time period, it's not going to count those extra years. It's only going to count the time frame indicated in the instructions. Once you put in your begin, your end date, and your units assisted, it's going to calculate the admin years there at the far right and auto-populate in the self-score portion further down in the application. For the labor program attachments, that's right down there at the bottom in the shaded, peach shaded area. If you're going to attach those documents, we're going to need them to be labeled exactly as they are on the screen. So when you get to this part of the bottom of the application, you're going to see whether or not you met that 550 point minimum. At that arrow right there where it says points, if you did not meet that minimum score, that cell will be red. If you have met that that score, it's going to populate where you got the points in each category. You need that 550 to move forward and be funded. So I don't have an application for the project development loan. However, the information we are looking for in that respect is the housing development experience and completed project. We're looking for your loan underwriting and loan servicing experience, proposed development experience, meaning your number of units and the type of project it is, project feasibility and your funding sources. We need your site control information, approvals, utilities, soils, phase 1 and 2, and so on. Financing sources, the market affordability, description of units, and contributed labor program information. So organizing the application. That application summary, the first document we went over, is going to be the first thing in your binder. There is an attachment checklist. It is not mandatory and it's not part of the application, but it is available, and we do recommend that you use it just to keep track of what documents you're submitting and for us to also help us when we review the application that all the documents we need are there. So we'd like the application summary, the attachment checklist, the required documents such as the resolution, the payee data record, and so on. For nonprofits, those additional items will come right behind that. And then your certifications, housing element, commitment, and those will come right behind the those documents. What will come next is whatever activity you're applying for, mortgage assistance, OOR, that application is going to follow those documents. And then we want our backup documentation right behind that. Program targeting, that means your qualified census tract information or redevelopment area, your program experience narrative, your underwriting loan servicing experience and that narrative, and your commitment to long-term resiliency standards if you are applying for the OOR component. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so when you submit the application, of course, we need the original with wet signature to come in a 3-ring binder and a copy on CD or flash drive. We will not take any walk-in applications. You must submit them by carrier service, UPS, FedEx, to CalHome program at HCD, West El Camino in Sacramento. Okay, let's go over the application evaluation portion. So there are 4 main components in our application scoring. Capability up to 400 points, community need 150 points, feasibility 250 points, and community revitalization 100 points. For the capability component, we are looking for the capability to operate a program or project and demonstrate prior experience in administering that program or project. We are also looking for a loan servicing or a plan to provide loan servicing and management capability. So the first part of the application we went over where it had the beginning and end date, that's where these points calculate. It's going to calculate the number of units assisted based on this scale here and give you that point on the right hand side in the self-score portion of the application. So for community need, all of the counties will get the full points for this because obviously you're in the geographically eligible area, as this is a disaster NOFA for just those geographic eligible jurisdictions. For feasibility, same situation. You will get the full 250 points for feasibility. So between community need and feasibility, you've got already 400 points to start, and you only need 550 to be funded. So we're making it pretty easy for everybody to get some funding for disaster assistance. For the community revitalization, just this component, the qualified census tract, we want to make it clear that it's all the units must be in that area for the 100 points or no 0 points. So it's all or nothing. It's no in between. They're either all there or they are not. We will deduct 50 points if you have not expended 95% of the most recently awarded grant by the 36th month. However, prior round penalties are not deducted in this current round. In the experience portion of the application where we asked you for that last 4 years experience, I believe it actually asked for 5 years because we are going to, in the event of a tiebreaker, we're going to use that 5th year to break that tie for the units assisted. So if it says, it's asking for 5, we're counting 4, and that 5th year will be for the tiebreaker. So for climate adaptation, what HCD is trying to do is make sure that CalHome funded activities are implemented in a manner that reduces greenhouse gas emissions and adapts to the climate change. Now, if funds are used for owner-occupied rehab, applicants must include commitment to meet long-term resiliency standards in rebuilding homes destroyed by disasters identified in the NOFA. Resiliency is generally defined as a future ability to resist and recover from future disasters. Applicants must demonstrate commitment to immediate and long-term resiliency by describing completed or planned actions to address building standards, zoning and site planning, long-term planning, and public outreach. Please see Appendix B for details and requirements. And that's it. I'm going to hand the presentation now over to Amy, who will take you through the grants management portion. Thank you.
If and or when you receive an award, your award letter is HCD's commitment to you that your proposed program or project will be entering into a contract with the state to deliver the commitment made in your application. The state of California does not allow any costs to be reimbursed unless they were generated within the contract period, which begins on the effective date of the standard agreement. This is also the date HCD signs the agreement. The standard agreement is comprised of a signature page, a fiscal page, and several exhibits. It represents the agreement between the applicant and the state. In the following slides, we'll go through the standard agreement itself and point out key areas to pay close attention to. We have standard STD 213 and STD 215. Standard Agreement 213 has all of your basic information, such as the agreement number, the parties, the term and grant amount. It lists the exhibits, identifies the grantees and their address, the state agency name and address, as well as signature lines. Standard Agreement 215 consists of a description of the activity or activities that the applicant applied for, the agreement outline, which essentially summarizes the purpose of the NOFA, and there's also a section that captures any contract-approved amendments. Exhibit A includes authority, which cites all applicable statutes and regulations that govern the program. It incorporates the grant application and corresponding NOFA by reference into the agreement. The scope of work references back to the application. Any revisions to the scope will require written request by grantee and HCD approval. Keep in mind this may require an amendment to the standard agreement. The amount of the agreement, which does cap the amount to the amount of the award. It denotes the expenditure deadline, which is 36 months from the date of the award, and the expiration deadline, which is 36 months from the date the contract is executed by HCD. It lists the coordinator for HCD that will be the individual to contact regarding the agreement. Each grantee will have a contract manager assigned, and it's best to contact them directly. The grantee coordinator is also listed, which is the contact for the grantee and typically the authorized representative and/or applicant. Exhibit B refers to funds requests, which can be done via reimbursement or advance. Before receiving any funds, HCD must receive, review, and approve all of the following items: program guidelines, which includes each activity, a loan servicing plan, an executed reuse agreement, an executed monitoring agreement, and loan document templates for each activity. Exhibit D includes the effective date or work commencement date, a list of the eligible activities. It will explain that the contractor doing the work must carry comprehensive general liability insurance. Inspections should be conducted where the grantee will have the contractor inspect all work performed. HCD does reserve the right to inspect any site where work is being performed. Signage will also need to be displayed referencing the department as one of the entities providing financing to the development. Exhibit D also includes reporting requirements, which means during the term of the agreement, the contractor will submit a performance report no later than 30 days after the end of each calendar quarter. Record retention. All records pertaining to the performance of this agreement are to be maintained for 3 years after final payment. These records can be audited at any time at the department's request. And a 20-year monitoring agreement shall be entered into, in which the department will have access to any necessary reporting information. Reporting. Again, please remember that a performance report is due no later than 30 days after the end of each calendar quarter. No draw requests will be processed until both quarterly and annual reports are up to date. In the next section, we'll talk about program guidelines. Here is a list of some of the items to include when establishing your program guidelines. The types of housing units assisted, such as SFR, condo, or manufactured housing, the interest rate on the loans, maximums or limits for CalHome subsidy amounts per loan, CLTV, and sales price or value. List the data source used for setting maximum sales price and values. They should also include underwriting policies, such as methodology for determining eligibility and income, as well as benchmarks for creditworthiness. Note the allowable terms of senior and junior liens. Outline subordination requirements of the CalHome loan to a new senior lien. Remember to avoid jeopardizing the CalHome lien and indicate CLTV and rate and term requirements. Lastly, note the methodology for handling defaults, foreclosures, and short sales. Next, we'll cover income requirements. When qualifying your applicants, please include the following factors: household size, counting all persons, regardless of age, with the exception of foster children, unborn children, children subject to custody with less than 50% of time at the residence. Gross income for all adult household members using source documents or third-party verifications where necessary. You should be looking at how much income will be received in the next 12 months. Please remember to use the CalHome Gross Income Worksheet, which can be found on the HCD website, and also refer to the state income limits per county. The promissory note. The requirements of the note should include principal and interest payments are deferred for the term of the CalHome program, the limited permissions to transfer, that the loans are not assumable, and payoffs and paydowns can be made at any time penalty-free. Underwriting. Please remember to include these items in your underwriting guidelines. Each application should be signed and dated. Determine eligibility for the property, such as requirements for an appraisal and sales price or value limits, as well as income and risk level, examining creditworthiness, debt ratios, etc. confirm the subsidy amount. It does not exceed the CalHome cap. The loan term is consistent with the program. The CalHome loan is the only subsidy. The term of senior loans meet CalHome requirements, such as there should be no arms or negative amortization, no deferred interest, and maturity date must be the same as the CalHome loan. Lien position or subordinate financing should ensure the fees are reasonable and consistent with those charged for first liens. There is no balloon payment before the maturity date of the CalHome loan, and principal and interest are deferred for the term of the CalHome loan. Homebuyer education. Please be cognizant of these requirements. This is for mortgage assistance activities only. It can be done by a recipient or contracted to a third party. If a third party provides the service, please remember you must submit a copy of the contract or MOU for approval, and each borrower must receive a certificate of completion and a copy submitted to the department. Loan servicing. Here are the loan servicing requirements. You are responsible for loan servicing for the term of the loan. It may be done by the recipient or a contracted third party. If a third party provides the service, a copy of the contract must be submitted to the department. The loan servicing plan elements should include things like a procedure for verifying owner occupancy, current status of insurance, property taxes are current and paid, the methodology to track loan repayments, calculate payoffs, process demands, as well as reconveyance of deeds of trust, and outline the process for collections and defaults. Reuse account. The reuse account plan will need to include the following items. It must be a designated account separate from other active grants. Do not commingle funds. It needs to describe the tracking system used to document things such as source of funds, borrowers' names, loan or reference numbers, grant year, separate entries to account for principal and interest earned. It also needs to describe the eligible use of account funds, such as CalHome eligible activities, like mortgage assistance and owner-occupied rehab. Monitoring. Recipient monitoring will be done. This is to ensure compliance with CalHome regulations, to provide technical assistance, and suggest best practices. The methods of monitoring are desk reviews, site visits during active grant phase, and site visits during the remainder of the 20-year agreement. That will end this section of the CalHome Disaster NOFA. Please feel free to submit any questions or clarification to calhomenofa@hcd.ca.gov.